The term body snatcher is usually thought of as an old term, used by those back in the ye olde 17 and 1800s for those who stole bodies from graves and sold them on to medical schools. We spoke about all that in our video about how people back then tried to thwart the body snatchers. But even though laws were put in place in many countries in the late 1800s and did put a stop to most of it, it didn't and hasn't stopped all of it. And today the sale of body and body parts is big business. Before we start, we post death-related content every Friday, so if that sounds like your kind of thing, consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's talk modern day body snatching. Now when it comes to the stealing of bodies in the modern day, you have to understand that the motivation hasn't changed, but the methods have. Also, we are not going to be talking about the random individual stories, but rather general large-scale issues a country may have with the stealing of bodies. But just so you are aware, one-off instances are pretty common. A few examples being that of Gladys Hammond in 2004 in the UK, whose body was stolen for ransom by animal rights groups, ransom being a pretty common reason for corpse theft in the modern era. Then there was Muhammad Fari Ali and Muhammad Arif Ali, brothers from Pakistan, who were arrested in 2011 and 2014 for stealing bodies for the purpose of cannibalism. Yep, they were arrested, jailed, got out, did it again. Further down the weird scale, much like the case of Ed Gein, a Russian man, Anatoly Moscovin, was arrested in 2011 for the removal of bodies of young girls from their graves, taking them home and turning them into dolls because he wanted children but wasn't allowed to adopt, and because he believed parents of these deceased young girls had abandoned them by burying them. And gee, I can't imagine why he wasn't allowed to adopt. If you are a psych student, that is a incredibly fascinating case to look at from that perspective, by the way. So with that said, let's look at countries that have a pretty big problem with corpse theft. Starting with India. While India banned the export of human remains in the mid-1980s, it continues to have a big black market problem with the international trade of human skeletons. It is estimated that 20 to 25,000 human skeletons are smuggled out of India every year through Nepal, China and Bangladesh. The skeletons reach markets in the US, Japan, Europe and the Middle East, mostly for medical institutions. The price for a complete skeleton in those markets ranges from $700 to $1,500 depending on the quality and size. In India itself, a full skeleton costs around $350. It is said that they prefer to sell to the Middle East, where there are virtually no cadavers available because these are mostly Muslim countries where that would be against their religion to do so. So medical schools there are desperate and willing to pay more. The irony being that most people buried in India are of the Muslim faith themselves, and most other faiths cremate over there. There is much more that could be said about that dynamic, but let's not poke that hornet's nest. So Indian police are constantly making arrests, but perhaps the biggest arrest in recent times was in 2007 when 3 men were caught on a bus with 67 full human skeletons. And while I could find the police report, unfortunately there wasn't any photos because I wanted to know how you transport 67 skeletons on a bus. Even if they were all jumbled together, I can't work out how that would work. But it certainly isn't just medical schools keeping these illegal trade going. Nope, there's also religion to blame. After arrest, many smugglers admit that the hollow human thigh bones were in great demand in Buddhist monasteries and were used as blowhorns, and the skulls as vessels to drink from for both Hindu and Buddhist religious ceremonies, most common in Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan and northeastern India. When questioned on the subject, police claim that they lack the equipment, manpower and expertise to stop this practice. The illegal body trade in India is without question linked to poverty, as it is poverty and those ranked as untouchables by the Indian caste system who feel the need to participate in this trade out of desperation. This is acknowledged by criminal defence attorneys, the government itself, the smugglers themselves and various aid agencies. And with this kind of poverty unlikely to be resolved within India anytime soon, this issue isn't going anywhere. USA. The USA has had a very well-known, well-documented issue with modern-day body snatching for decades now, so I know this won't come as a shock to most of you. There are 3 main motives for it, and they vary in different ways of operating. So let's get the obvious one out of the way: the illegal sale of body parts for medical usage. Yes, you heard that right. medical usage, not medical training, although there are parts of that too. Now, you may balk and say that's not really body snatching because they haven't gone to the effort of digging it out of the ground, but you must come up with the times. Things have changed since the 1800s. The motives are pretty much the same, but half the work. Nowadays, dodgy funeral homes work together with those in the morgue and middlemen to illegally remove non-perishable body parts, bones, ligaments and the like, without permission, sell them on to tissue suppliers who in turn give them to medical facilities. Now, medical facilities usually get their donations from the Human Tissue Bank, which is not for profit and acquired legally through post-death donations. And because they are done legally, they know the full medical background of the donor. But with illegally harvested parts, they don't. So someone who needs a bone graft in their neck could end up with the bone of a 90-year-old being implanted in them, which is rather useless. Or someone could be implanted with a part that contains HIV, for example. These body chop shops are so numerous that authorities claim they shut one down and another 2 spring up elsewhere. And with very few people actually signing up to be legal organ donors in the US, it leaves a big hole in the market where criminals can thrive. And that means a dead body has huge value. Estimates suggest up to $250,000 a body. Prices for parts vary. A lower jaw can fetch up to $3,000, fingers can come in at $15 a piece, and sexual organs used for practicing new surgery techniques generally go for $250. And all that without having to get out a shovel. But that's not to say that good old-fashioned body snatching doesn't continue in the US. The difference is these people want skeletons for their morbid collections, so they aren't digging up fresh bodies but old bodies. Authorities have said that they have long been concerned about morbid collectors digging up skeletonized bodies in old cemeteries, where they aren't buried overly deep and are in simple, easy-to-open coffins and caskets. And of course, it's not just their own collections, but because they can make money selling them. One would think that you wouldn't be able to buy a human skull on Facebook Marketplace and the like, but it would seem that if you lie your ass off and call it antique or ethically acquired, you can get away with anything. Police estimated that 100 skeletons were stolen from their graves in New York State alone in 2018. But there is no federal law saying you can't keep or sell human remains, and state laws are very vague at best. And unless someone is caught in the actual act of digging up a grave, it's unlikely the police will be able to do anything about it. So yeah, that's lovely. Which brings us on to the third reason for body snatching in the USA: rituals. Authorities have stated that believers of Santeria and Palo Mayombe, both West African-derived religions or sects with components of Catholicism, sometimes dig up remains for particular rituals. Believers who do this are in the minority of these groups, and while it's not common, it is common enough that the authorities know about it, though figures are hard to come by. Though it would appear Massachusetts is a particular hotspot. Now, before some of you get up in arms crying, "You're just picking on us, other countries have this problem too," you would be sort of right. The use of human body parts and bones are part of many religious and cultural rituals around the world, but they are more fresh. Made to order, you could say. So just be thankful that yours are coming out of the ground. New Zealand. Probably not a country you expected to see here, but it is more of a technicality. So in the past decade, there has been a rise in extended family members of deceased Maori individuals stealing the body from the funeral home or viewing or whatever in order to take them back to their land to have them buried there rather than the land their immediate family wants them to be buried on. Again, this is not common, but common enough that authorities are aware of the trend. But because according to New Zealand law, a body cannot be owned, therefore body snatching is not illegal and police cannot act. However, usually with some mediation, these situations are quickly resolved and the deceased can rest in peace. And in case you're wondering why it really only has been in the past decade or so, no one really seems to be sure. But the theory is that because of social media and everyone posting everything online for anyone to see, extended family are able to quickly find out that someone has died and act in the way that they see in the best interest of the deceased. Whereas before social media, it could have taken days for them to find out from the other side of the country. And that's the theory anyway. International. We are all aware of museums around the world holding Indigenous remains, mostly having been stolen in the 1700s and 1800s, and check out our death debate video on that one. But did you know that Indigenous people's remains are still being dug up illegally around the world for sale to private collectors? In the past 50 years, and including in the past 5 years, as in now, this has been reported in Peru, Brazil, Bolivia, Suriname, Guatemala, Mexico, USA, Canada, Moldova, Bulgaria, Serbia, Armenia, Western Sahara, Liberia, Cameroon, Madagascar, India, Nepal, Mongolia, Cambodia, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, and Vanuatu. It's said that these mostly ultra-rich collectors will often have their minions bribe poverty-stricken Indigenous communities, or they will enter countries under the guise of legitimate archaeological dig and smuggle them out that way. Although, let's be fair, I'm pretty sure most Indigenous communities would believe that legitimate modern archaeological digs, digging up their ancestors and taking them off somewhere claiming it's for science, is also body snatching. But hey, what do I know? But yes, shitty, egotistical, rich people are still digging up the remains of Indigenous people around the world for their collections. Gotta catch them all, I suppose. Australia. Let's finish this video up with a more local one-off story. Now, yeah, I know we said we weren't doing one-off stories, but this one happened only last year. So the Aussies here might remember, but back in March last year, 2 skulls were stolen from a casket in a mausoleum at the Footscray General Cemetery in Melbourne. And a few days later, we heard that the skulls had been located in a man's house not far and that he had been arrested. Well, I hadn't heard anything else since then, so I looked into it. Well, this is the guy, 40-year-old Tristan Hearn, kind of looks like a member of a 90s boy band. Anyways, he was supposed to turn up to the Melbourne Magistrates Court for his hearing in August last year, but he didn't make it. So police went to his house and found him dead. Police said he had been dead for approximately 12 days before they found him, and it wasn't being treated as suspicious, and it is currently believed that he opted out of life. But that still leaves us with the motive of stealing the skulls in the first place. Now, we can't be sure obviously, but satanic symbols were left near those open caskets. However, police say this could also have been planted to make it look like a satanic cult did it. And while he did have some small tattoos that possibly could be linked to that kind of stuff, and a couple of Facebook posts that were a bit emo-ish back in the day, it should also be mentioned that that cross that he apparently had carved into his chest wasn't a Satan thing, it was a surgery thing. He had a double lung transplant because of cystic fibrosis. And the media will just grab onto anything and run with it. So we don't officially know why he stole them, but I would place my bets on the I want skulls in my collection to make me look evil category. But what are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments. So that is a quick look into modern day body snatching. It has changed how it operates to suit the modern times, just like everything does. And I have no doubt that it occurs in other countries as well. It's just that these countries have the most documented evidence for it occurring, and there is a lot of documented evidence. And with that, thanks for watching from Gary and I. Now,